So how do you work with directors who get so married to that plan that they just can't deviate from it because that's how they saw it, and they know their vision is, you just trust me on this one, this is going to work, we've just got to do it this way?
Okay, this is a plan in terms of
Shooting the film.
shooting a film, but with the scene, with the actors, with
Yeah.
visuals, or what aspect?
Okay, with an actor, and let's say the actor who was one way in the audition and one way in the read brought a good level of emotion. And then you get them on set, and they've kind of retracted into a little bit of a shell, but it's working in some ways, but not the way you envisioned it. So you can still play the scene, but they're going to be a little more awkward and introverted, not maybe more emotional how you wanted them to be.
Okay. Okay, so there's been an adjustment within performance that you may not have asked for, but it's there.
Right.
And you're saying it's good, it's interesting, but it's not what you wanted or thought you wanted, say back in rehearsal and pre-production.
Right.
And now you're shooting.
Now you're
right?
shooting.
And so what do you do?
What do you do? Because even though, yeah, it looks good and I like it, and other people, the other actors are feeding off the energy, it's got to be this one way.
Okay, the first thing is the idea, it's got to be this one way, is a trap. Watch out for that. Because I can tell you right now, as a director, to a director, this idea of while you're shooting, knowing precisely what you want, and you're going for that, is a problem. Not a problem going for it, but it's a problem believing that if you have that, then you're fine. Because I know exactly when you'll know what you want from that character and that scene. And that's in post-production. In post-production, when you're editing that scene together, and this has happened many, many times, I've seen it way too many times, you edit the scene together and you go, okay, looks good, got it. Then you put the whole movie together, and now that scene isn't looking so good anymore because it's part of a stream. A movie is not a bunch of scenes linked together. It's a stream. It's a constant movement. It's a constant movement of characters. And now suddenly these two characters hitting that scene, and something is off. Now, maybe it's too restrained. Maybe it's too enthusiastic. Maybe it's there's something that's tipping, something's wrong. Now, so the big question, now we're in post-production. That scene isn't quite working. What options do you have to fix the scene? Because I can tell you, and again, I've seen this many times, at that moment you go, I know what I need, but I don't have it. We didn't shoot it that way. We didn't shoot it where she's more restrained. Or we didn't shoot it where he's more adamant. We didn't shoot it where the emotions has more conflict, or we didn't shoot it with more sense of sympathy or empathy or whatever you think if we had that, we'd be great. So the question really becomes, why didn't you shoot that? The reason you didn't shoot that is because you didn't think that's what you needed. Even if someone had suggested, even if I had been on the set with a director, and this has happened a few times, and I said, are you sure you don't want to do one more where she's a little more restrained, or one more where she's a little bit more out of control, or try one with a slight difference? No, I'm fine. As soon as I hear I'm fine, I just can feel that chills, like, oh, because you don't know. Now, many directors I've told them you don't know. So a lot of the directors I work with, if I'm with them, I say, you sure you want to do that? They said, it'll take less time to shoot that than it would be to argue it. So I say, shoot it. Now this comes back to Robert Altman. Okay, Robert Altman, who I knew for a while. And when I was in New York, he was directing a play. He was directing a play that my wife at the time was in, called Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, Jimmy Dean. Now Robert Altman is obviously a master film director, independent film director, who had done theater before. In fact, he had done another play with another friend of mine, Frank South. He'd done play of his. So he knew about theater, but now he's doing a big Broadway show. And because my wife was in it, I was allowed to come in and sit in on rehearsals. And I was there one time. Now Robert Altman has like a 6-week rehearsal period, which is typical. And it was about halfway through it, and he had the whole play staged. He had tried a lot of different things, and you could see he was going, I don't know what to do next. I don't know what to do next. Now, I, being the arrogant person that I am, and sort of cynical, said to him, well, one thing you could do is try all the things you know won't work. And he says, oh, that's great. Okay. So he started doing the craziest things. Let's try it this way. Now, this is theater, and being my background being theater, this is what we do in theater. We try things that don't work. We try things that seem ridiculous, way outside the box. And he started playing with it, and the actors loved it and all that. But the important thing is what he said later. He said to me, he says, I get it. The rehearsal process in theater is the same as the editing process in film. Now, when he said that at first, I didn't quite get it, but I thought about it, and I went, wait a minute, he's right. The rehearsal process in theater is a process of trial and error, experimentation. Let's try this, doesn't work. Let's try that, oh, that works. Let's keep that. And even in terms of script, you can be changing things in theater. You can keep changing. So it's a trial and error period leading up to opening night. And eventually you narrow it down to this, we're going to play it this way. And even the day before you open, you could be trying things. The editing process is a similar process. It's trial and error. Let's cut it together this way. Let's try it this way. Let's try it with this moment. Let's try it cutting the scene this way. But the thing is, the difference between theater and film, in post-production film, if you don't have the material you need to go through a trial and error process, you can't do it. You look at that actress's performance and you say, I've got 4 takes of her doing it. Every time she did it pretty much the same way. That's all I've got. So you don't have the choice. My recommendation to every director I work with, and this is the way I shoot stuff, my job in not post-production, my job in production is to create the range of material from which I will choose later. I don't have the way to do it. I have a range. No, I have in my mind, I know what I want, but I also want a range of material way beyond that. Sometimes the most ridiculous things. And the actors know that. In fact, I tell the actors, I don't know how I want this to play. I don't even know how I want the entire movie to play. They said, you don't? I said, no. So we're going to keep experimenting. We're going to shoot a lot of rehearsals. We're going to shoot, and the actors relax. They go, oh, the pressure is off. I'm not trying to hit a perfect performance because Mark doesn't know what it is. I said, no, I don't know what it is. I'll tell you what I think it could be. I could be wrong. So even this last thing I shot just a few weeks ago, and I said to the actors, and I always do this, I said, okay, let's do a few more just for you. Be outrageous. I asked the actors, be outrageous. Go way outside the box, as far as you want. And we shoot that, and some of that stuff is amazing. And we use it. Had no idea. This is staying open, but it's going into post-production with this range of material out of which myself and the editor can start to create the scene. As you know, in a film, the scene is not created when you're shooting it. The scene is created in post-production, and we will create a scene that never happened. It never happened. That 3-minute scene never was played that way. On film it is, but that 3 minutes is made up of about 7 or 8 different performances. So there is no perfect performance. And that scene is cut in relationship to the rest of the movie. And I need that range of material in order to do that.
It almost sounds like a new director would have more of that mindset where I have to get it specifically this way, but then ones that have sat in an editing bay and have seen and been in the position of, I don't have any filler and I can't change it around.
Yes, and this is why some of the best directors we have, and you just recently, when we were off camera, you mentioned, who do you mention? Sidney Lumet.
Oh, right, Stanley Kubrick. Cassavetes, and Bergman. Mm-hmm.
Who all worked in theater. Oh. Now, directors who've worked in theater understand this process absolutely, because they say, well, that's my process. My process is rehearsal, trial and error, rehearsal, trial and error, not trying to nail something down before I'm done. It's all trial and error. So the directors understanding that process, and this is why when I consult with directors, I take them through what we call a workshopping process. I take them through, with their film, this trial and error process, even before pre-production. with actors so they can start to see how this can work. They can see the range of possibilities and get out of their mind, getting back to your question, releasing from their mind the feeling that, excuse me, releasing from their mind the feeling or the belief that they know how the movie should be played. That's not important. In fact, that's a trap. I know how the scene should be played. That's a trap. Better way to think about a scene is, I know how I want this scene to hit me emotionally. I know that. Which goes back to the script wash. I know how I want to be hit by this scene. I have no idea how I'm going to get there. And it's going to be trial and error right up into the last edit. Until I can look at it and go, that's it. It's doing it. It's doing it. It's doing it to me. This scene that I was just talking about that I recently shot, a shift in the music that the editor came up with, a slight shift that he did. He did a miraculous thing. And this was a scene that I was directing, and I was directing it in front of a group of directors that I was talking about earlier that came from overseas for this workshop, demonstrating all these techniques. But the scene in the editing was shifted dramatically. This is really interesting in terms of the trial and error. As the editor was cutting it together, he picked a piece of music he thought would be interesting on the scene. I liked it. We changed the edit. Now that piece of music didn't fit anymore, and he took it out. And Elsha and I went, oh no, we want to keep that in. But there was another piece of music we wanted to come right after. 2 different pieces of music by the same composer, same artist. Well, they don't fit together at all. And we can't we keep that one in and put that one in? And he goes, no, you can't. It won't work. But he, as an editor, knew that we wanted to do that. And by actually manipulating the second piece of the music, changing the key that it was in, he made them fit together, and suddenly the scene started working again. Now that's trial and error. That's the editing process. Now that was just a piece of music. It has nothing to do with the performances. But suddenly it underlined what was going on in the performances. And so you have to keep your mind open to all these possibilities constantly. One of my favorite quotes is from Sidney Pollack, who I know a little bit. When he said, making movies is great. I love the process of making movies. He says, there's only one problem. Now you have to understand Sidney came from theater too, and worked with Sanford Meisner and all that. He says, there's only one problem with movie making. Eventually, you have to show it to somebody. Which really means eventually you have to stop the process of making the movie. The process of making a movie is great, but when you have to lock things down and go, that's it, that's the hard part. That's the most painful part.